Hello everyone, I've got Sorcerer's Apprentice Mickey with me today, and if you've been around my channel for any length of time, then you know what that means. It's time for our next episode of Toy Box Tutorials. Last time, we began examining the sports toys, and today we're going to start building a little basketball game. It's a simple free throw game to see how many baskets you can score within a certain time limit. It'll take us a few weeks to build this game, and along the way it'll give me a chance to teach you how to use the various sports toys. When we're all done, you'll have a fun working example of what you can do with those toys. Oh, and by the way, in case you missed it, or you're coming into this episode late, don't forget to check out my Wonderland Mini Golf series that's airing right now on Mondays and Wednesdays, which provides another example of something fun you can build in the toy box using the sports toys. Okay, I'm starting off in an empty toy box, and the only thing I've done so far is use the sky changer over here to set the sky and the boom box to turn off the music. And the first thing we're going to need is to build a little arena for our game. And in order to do that, we're going to use the stadium stands from the sports toys drawer. And the toy box by default is oriented with the player facing that way. So I'm going to move this out of the way. And we'll put it down here and spin it around, because when I come into the toy box, I'd kind of like the player facing that way. Alright, in the sports toys drawer, if you go left, you find the stadium stands. And we're going to begin with those and use these to frame in a little arena for our game. And we'll place this one here about in the middle, like that. And this little build here will go really quick. We'll put a curved one on this side, curved one on this side, and two more flat ones on either end. So there's basically our arena. And then if we go to the racing toys and we go left, we have these barrier pieces. Those are invisible ones. I kind of want the other ones here that are visible. And I'm going to use these small, short, curved barriers to kind of enclose in this end of the game. That one's kind of tall, so we'll use this one. And they're pretty much the same on either side. So there's our stadium. And this is going to keep the balls close by, so we don't have to chase them too much. And because it's a basketball stadium, we should probably add some lights. So if we come over here to the sports toys, we have these stadium lights that are kind of nice. And I'm going to place these right here, kind of on the seam between the different stadium stand pieces. That just kind of adds a little bit of a dramatic flair to the stadium, having those big lights up there. It's just a visual thing. And grass isn't a good thing to play basketball on. So if we go down to the blocks drawer, we'll go ahead and add in a floor for our stadium. And I'm going to use this large floor piece. Kind of slip it under the middle of that piece there. And for the style on this, if we scroll to the right a ways, down next to the water, there's a style called planks, which looks a lot like a basketball floor. And so I really like that. That's this one. And I'll set that to be my theme. And I think we'll go ahead, since the boards are running up and down, I'm going to turn it so that it goes that way. I think I like that better. And I want to try to line this up like that. So yeah, this is positioned just pretty much perfectly where I want it to be. And we'll just fill in the floor. And to me that looks so much better. That looks like a basketball floor. So there we go. There's our stadium. Now, one of the things you may not know about the stadium stands is that they have logic connections. You'll notice in the lower right, the logic menu is available for this. And if we open that menu, we have new logic connection here. And I'll get to that in a moment, because it also has some behaviors. And the behaviors and the logic connections kind of go together. So I'm actually going to demonstrate these connections in my basketball game. But for today, let's just use a few buttons to kind of test them out. So these will be temporary controls. So I'm going to put down a series of push buttons here, action buttons. I'm going to put 6 of them down. Alright, so for the first one here, if we do a new logic connection when pressed, and we come over to our first stadium stand, you'll notice you can actually connect the button up to this. So if we open that menu, there's 4 things you can make this do. You can make it do soft cheering, or regular cheering, or loud cheering, or even booing. So let's hook the first button up to do soft cheering. We can kind of test these out a little bit, see what the differences are. For the second button, we'll have that do cheering. For the third button, we'll make that do the loud cheering. And the fourth button, new logic connection when pressed, we'll have it do the booing. And before we actually demonstrate that, let's go ahead and look at the logic menu on this. So if you look at the new logic connections, you'll see they're all the same options. So when something triggers the stadium stand to do soft cheering, for example, this will broadcast this trigger signal. So you can have this toy invoke other toys whenever something tells this to do soft cheering, or loud cheering, or booing. So that's what you have with most of the stadium stands. Whoops, I did not want to pick that up. Let me place that back. And the stadium gate has something a little bit different, but let's go ahead and try this out. So first one, you see they move around and it makes a little cheering. You'll also notice that it doesn't last. They eventually stop moving and stop making any sounds. This is just a temporary thing that it does. Cheering is a little louder, and you see they move a little bit more. And loud cheering has about the same amount of movement, but the volume is louder. And on that one, they actually throw things. So that's pretty funny for the booing. Now, as I mentioned, the stadium gate is a little bit different. So let's drop this one actually over here. I'm going to make sure this is squarely on the block, because this one has a little bit different behavior. It does all the same things that those do, but there's a gate here. And when you walk up to it, it opens, and you walk away and it closes, similar to the automatic doors in the Gameplay Toys drawer. But I dropped down 2 extra buttons here to show you that there's a little bit more to this piece than the others, and it's related to that gate. So if we come to this button and do a new logic connection when pressed, you'll notice there's 2 additional behaviors. There's open and close. So you can use a logic connection to open the gate, and you can use a logic connection to close it. And these work similar to the automatic doors that we've looked at earlier in this series. And if you look at the new logic connections for this piece, you'll see there's 2 additional trigger signals when it's opened and when it's closed. So whenever the player walks through that gate and it opens, this will broadcast this trigger signal. And when that gate is closed, it'll close. Or when you do that through a logic connection. And so now if we come out here and we walk up to the gate now, you'll notice it doesn't open. It behaves just like those automatic doors in that once you add a logic connection to it, it doesn't open automatically, which means you have to use a logic connection to open it. And you'll notice, again, it doesn't close automatically either. That's why you have to have a logic connection to close the gate. And so that can be really helpful when you're playing a game and you're using this as the entrance to your arena. You can use a logic connection, for example, to the challenge maker to close that door and leave it closed during the game and reopen it when the game is over. So I just wanted you to be aware of that. So let's go ahead and delete that. Now, as I mentioned, and as you saw, when you invoke these toys to do the cheering and the booing, it only lasts for a short time. So in order to get them to continuously cheer, you need to use a couple of additional Creativitoys. And so we're going to use 2. We're going to use a repeater, and we're going to use a randomizer. And I'll place these toys and hook them up because we're actually going to use these as part of our game. So on the repeater, and we've looked at both of these toys earlier in this series, so if you need a refresher, you can go back and look at that. But on the repeater, we're going to set the properties. I'll set the rate to 2 seconds. So every 2 seconds, the repeater will go off. And this repeater, new logic connection, when it's repeating, every time it repeats, it'll invoke the randomizer. And I'll have the randomizer invoke randomly one of those 5 stadium stands. So the cheering will kind of move around. It's not going to be continuous on every piece. And I think that just looks and feels a little bit more realistic when you're in here. So on the randomizer, a new logic connection on random trigger 1. We can come over to this stadium stand, and I'm going to use cheering. The soft cheering can sometimes be a little bit too soft when there's things going on, to the point where you wouldn't hear it. For random trigger 2, we'll come to this corner one, and you'll see it has all the same logic connections as the straight piece. New logic connection, random trigger 3. We'll go to this middle one. Random trigger 4. We'll hook that up to this one. And then random trigger 5. We'll hook up to this one. And for right now, we'll just use these 2 buttons to turn it on and off. So, new logic connection when pressed. We'll turn the repeater on. And this one, new logic connection when pressed, will turn the repeater off. So every 2 seconds, the repeater will go off and invoke a different stadium stand, and that'll have continuous cheering. So that first one goes off over there, and then that one over there. And now those over there. So you see it gets the crowds moving a little bit different rate around there. And the cheering kind of moves around a little bit too as you're listening. And then if somebody were to score a goal, we could hook up to the loud cheering. And ideally that would hook up to all 5 stands, so all of them would kind of start doing the loud cheering temporarily, and that would override the repeater action. But right now I only have that hooked up to the one here on the right. So it just gives you some nice background noise as you're playing your sports game, and I really like that they built into that. Of course, you could do the booing. That stand's not happy. So it just adds a fun new element to your games, and I really like that. Well, that's it for the stadium stands. You'll get to see me use these stands some more in the coming episodes, but that's everything I'm going to cover in this video. Next time, we'll take a look at the basketball hoop and the other sports goals as we finish building our little arena here, and we'll start implementing the logic for our basketball game. Until then, I want to thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed today's tutorial, or at least found it helpful. Please leave a comment before you go to let me know. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel yet and you enjoy Disney Infinity, just click on my photo in the lower right corner. That's all for me today. Have a nice weekend.